Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest questions out there. Why are some countries so rich while others are so poor? Is it their geography, their culture, or is it something else entirely? Let's dig in. So, picture this. It's the 1500s and 1600s. You've got two big European players colonizing the New World, the Spanish in the Americas and the English up in Virginia. And guess what? They both wanted the exact same thing, to get rich and fast, preferably with gold. Now the Spanish, they had this down to a science. It was brutal, but man was it effective. They'd capture the local leader, like Cortez did with Moctezuma, seize all their wealth, and then use forced labor systems like the encomienda to squeeze out even more. But then you have the English. They try to run the exact same playbook in Jamestown, and it's a complete, unmitigated disaster. The local population didn't have piles of gold lying around. You couldn't just force them to work for you, and the colonists, they almost starved to death.
So what gives? Why did this one strategy create a massive empire for Spain, but for the English, it led to near-total failure and forced them down a completely different path? Well, the answer to that little historical puzzle, it turns out, is the key to understanding the massive inequality we see all around us in the world today. This isn't just a history lesson. It's about the very blueprint of how societies are built.
Okay, but before we jump into the big answer, we've got to talk about the usual suspects, right? Whenever you ask why some countries are poor, a couple theories always pop up first.
First up, you've got the geography hypothesis. This is the idea that, hey, maybe some places just got lucky, Maybe Eurasia's east-west layout made it super easy for crops and ideas to spread, or maybe it just had more animals you could domesticate, like cows and horses. It kind of makes sense on the surface, doesn't it? A geographical head start.
Yeah, but when you really start to poke at it, that whole theory starts to crumble. I mean, how does it explain North and South Korea? We're talking about the exact same peninsula, same climate, same everything, geographically speaking, yet they are worlds apart. And what about Africa? Why hasn't it caught up, even centuries after contact with Europe, closed any so-called knowledge gaps? The theory just doesn't line up with the reality on the ground.
All right, so if geography is out, what about culture? This is another big one. The idea that some cultures, maybe because of their religion or their work ethic or whatever, are just naturally better at creating wealth.
But again, the book we're looking at today, Why Nations Fail, argues that this is also a bit of a dead end. Take the Middle East, for instance. It's really easy to point to religion as the reason for economic struggles, but that completely ignores centuries of history. The real story, the book argues, is in the long-term impact of things like Ottoman rule and European colonialism. Those are the things that shape the political and economic landscape we see today, not the culture itself.
Okay, so if it's not geography and it's not culture, what in the world is it? Well, this is where we get to the core idea of the book. The answer lies in a country's institutions. Basically, the rules of the game that shape how a society works. So, on one side of the coin, you have what the authors call extractive institutions. Think of this as a society where the game is rigged from the start. The whole system, political, economic, you name it, is designed by a small, powerful group for one simple reason: to funnel wealth and resources from everybody else to them. Property rights? Forget about it. The law? It's whatever the people in charge say it is. All the power is concentrated right at the top.
And then you have the complete opposite: inclusive institutions. These are systems that are designed to let as many people as possible play the game. They create a level playing field. They protect your private property, whether you're rich or poor. The rule of law is consistent and fair for everyone. And this kind of environment naturally encourages people to invest, to innovate, to participate. Power isn't just for the few, it's spread out.
So you see the massive difference here, right? In one system, you could work your tail off, come up with a brilliant idea, and poof, someone more powerful can just take it all away. In the other system, you have a real, legitimate expectation that if you work hard and innovate, you'll get to enjoy the rewards. And that one single difference, well, it changes absolutely everything.
And nowhere is this institutional divide clearer than when you look at how each system deals with the engine of all economic progress: new ideas, innovation, technology. This engine has a name: creative destruction. It's this constant, messy, but essential process where new technologies come along and just blow the old ones out of the water. Think about how smartphones basically killed off a dozen other industries. This process is absolutely crucial for growth. But here's the catch: it always creates winners and losers. And very often, the losers are the powerful elites who are getting rich off the old system. And there's a fantastic story that shows exactly how these two systems react to this threat. So, Way back in 1705, an inventor named Dinozealus Papin builds the world's first steamboat. A game changer, right? Well, the local boatmen's guild, who had a complete monopoly on river traffic, didn't think so. They saw this thing as a direct threat to their livelihood. So what did they do? They attacked the boat and smashed it to pieces. Papin died broke. Now contrast that with England a bit later. There, inclusive institutions actually protected innovators like James Watt. His steam engine was allowed to thrive, and it went on to power the entire Industrial Revolution.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing with some angry boatmen. This fear of change was actual state policy in a lot of places. You had rulers like Francis I in Austria, and the Tsars in Russia, who actively blocked things like factories and railways. Why? Because they were terrified that these new technologies would bring workers together in cities, give them new ideas, and completely undermine the old feudal order that kept them on top. They literally chose poverty and stagnation over losing their grip on power.
So this fundamental difference in how societies are organized creates this incredible momentum. Over time, these two types of institutions start to create these powerful feedback loops. And that's what explains why these patterns of poverty and prosperity are so sticky, so incredibly hard to change.
With extractive institutions, you get trapped in what the authors call a vicious circle, and it's as bad as it sounds. It all starts with the political system being controlled by a very small group of elites. And shocker, what do those elites do? They design the entire economy to benefit themselves. They set up monopolies, they create barriers, they make sure all the country's wealth flows straight into their pockets. And with all that money, what do they do next? They use it to solidify their power even more. They buy more weapons, hire more security, bribe more officials, all to make sure they stay in charge. And that, of course, just lets them extract even more wealth, and the cycle repeats. It's a trap, and it is incredibly difficult to escape. But on the flip side, there's good news. Inclusive institutions can create their own feedback loop, a positive, self-reinforcing one called the virtuous circle. See, when political power is widely shared and kept in check by the rule of law, it naturally supports an economic system that's also inclusive, one that creates opportunities and a level playing field for pretty much everyone, not just a tiny group at the top.
And this broad prosperity does something amazing. It empowers ordinary citizens. People have the resources, the education, and the motivation to stand up and push back if any one group tries to grab too much power or rig the system. A perfect example of this is the trust-busting era in the US, when the public stood up to the massive monopolies of the robber barons and demanded that the market stay fair and open.
So this whole framework, it gives us this incredibly powerful new way to look at the world. It helps explain not just why some countries are rich and others are poor, but also their politics and their history. But it also leaves us with one final, absolutely critical question. If these vicious circles are so powerful, are poor nations just stuck? Are they doomed by their history? Or is there a way to break that cycle and build a new path towards prosperity? Honestly, that's the central challenge that defines our world today.